Good afternoon and welcome back to Stories with Don, reading Robin Hood. And today we are on chapter 19 and it is entitled Sir Richard of the Lea Pays His Debts. You will remember how Robin Hood helped the poor knight who had no money to pay his debts and so stood in danger of losing his lands. Well, Sir Richard of the Lea did not forget his good friend in the greenwood, and when he had saved 400 pounds, he set off to repay Robin. He took with him also 100 good bows and 100 sheaves of fine arrows as a present for the kindly outlaw. This time Sir Richard rode through the forest in a very different case from his last journey. Then he was sorrowful and sad, and looked the most wretched man in the world. Now he was gay and cheerful, riding a good horse and attended by a gallant band of men-at-arms. And all this change was due to Robin Hood, for if the knight had once lost his lands, he would have been ruined forever. So Sir Richard blessed the name of Robin Hood, who had saved him from the cruel, gasping hands of the covetous abbot of St. Mary's. Now, as the knight rode along at the head of his men, he came to a broad meadow beside a river and near the head of a bridge. This meadow presented a very lively, bustling scene, for the whole countryside had gathered there for a great merrymaking. There were jugglers and tumblers with gaping crowds round them. There were Saxon gleemen and wandering harpers. There were rude booths where merchants and peddlers showed their wares, but the biggest crowd of all was gathered about a ring where the best wrestlers had gathered from far and near to hold a contest for some very rich prizes. The winner of the wrestling match was to have a fine courser, whose saddle and bridle were burnished with gold, a splendid prize. To the second man would be given a white bull, while a pair of beautiful embroidered gloves, a gold ring, and a pipe of wine would fall to the next three in order of merit. With so many prizes, it was no wonder that stout yeomen had thronged to the merrymaking from all parts. Every man hoped that one prize would fall to him, if it were but one of the smaller rewards. The crowd was so dense near the bridge that the knight and his men could not pass without forcing their way roughly. This Sir Richard was not willing to do. And as the day was yet young and he had plenty of time, he sat his horse to watch the wrestling for an hour, while his men clustered about him, delighted to witness the keen contest which was expected. To the astonishment of everyone, there was no keen contest at all. This lay at the door of a big clumsy-looking fellow who shambled into the ring and threw every man pitted against him with the utmost ease. It did not matter who opposed him. The champion of this village, the best wrestler of that hamlet, every man went down as soon as the big fellow put his arms about an opponent. "Who can this be?" cried the people. "Such wrestling was never seen in England before. It is no match at all. The big fellow treats the others as if they were children coming at him." Shouts of wonder and applause rose as the powerful stranger brought about fall after fall. But in a short time, shouts of anger began to mingle with the outcries. The angry uproar burst from a band of foresters gathered at one corner of the ring. They had come there to support a comrade, Hubert o' the Strong Hand, a famous wrestler, and they had laid heavy wagers on their champion's success. The foresters had jeered at wrestler after wrestler as he crept beaten from the ring. "Wait till Hubert faces yonder big fellow," they cried. "Then ye will see what wrestling should be. Big as he is, Stronghand will toss him over one shoulder." These taunts, jeers, and promises greatly raised the expectation of the crowd, and when Hubert stepped confidently into the ring, all were excited by the hope of at last seeing a great contest. But though these hopes were at once dashed to the ground, Yet the onlookers saw a wonderful piece of work. For the big wrestler seized Hubert o' the Strong Hand and flung the forester clean over his head, arms and legs flying like the sails of a windmill. The defeated champion whirled through the air and dropped flat on his back on the turf. "A foul catch!" roared the angry foresters. "A foul catch! No throw! No throw!" "Nay, nay!" shouted Sir Richard, who loved fair play. "The hold and catch were fair enough. 'Twas a true throw." The foresters knew that quite well. They were only raising a clamor and false accusations of foul play to cover the defeat of their champion and to avoid paying the wagers they had lain on his head. A great uproar now arose around the ring. Some shouted against the big wrestler, some for him. But the former were greatly in the majority, for he had earned the enmity of many parties by overthrowing the man in whom the party had put its trust. "I've seen that big fellow before," mused Sir Richard, "but where was it? Where was it?" He thought for a while and then started in his saddle. "I have it, I have it," he said to himself. "'Tis the big man who was with Robin Hood. Now I remember that he fetched the bag with the 400 pounds in it. Aye, I am not likely ever to forget that." Sir Richard was right. Yes, it was Little John himself. He had been out on a scouting expedition, had heard of the wrestling, and had been unable to keep away. He had come intending only to look on at his favorite sport, but at the sight of the ring and the prizes he could not restrain himself, and had entered his name as Will o' the Glade, and had swept all before him. "Turn him from the ring," roared the foresters. "Away with him! 'Twas a foul catch! Let the wrestling begin again." This cry was echoed by many who wished to see their men have another chance at a contest from which this terrible champion had been excluded. But there were plenty of lovers of fair play, who spoke up stoutly for Little John and said that he had wrestled fairly. Suddenly Little John stood in great danger, for the angry foresters had burst into the ring and sprang at him, several with sword in hand, threatening him with death if he did not at once retire from the contest. But they were threatening the wrong man. The burly giant knew not what fear was, and stood his ground, resolutely defying them all. He would have been severely handled and possibly slain had not Sir Richard interfered at once. Calling upon his men to close about him and follow, the good knight rode into the crowd and forced his way to the place where Little John stood in the midst of the angry mob. "Stand back!" cried Sir Richard to the foresters. Having trouble talking all of a sudden. "Stand back and offer no violence to the man." The sheriff's men would have paid but little notice to the knight's words had not the latter been seconded by the crowd. Great numbers present knew Sir Richard, and they called out, "We will take Sir Richard for our judge. He is a good and honest knight. We know him and trust him. He shall decide this matter." The foresters were overawed by the general voice, and the assembly became silent to listen to Sir Richard. "Come, come, my masters," said the knight. "Is this our English fair play, that anger should be shown to a man who has proved himself the best wrestler I have seen for many and many a day? I have watched every fall, and each was fair and true, and I challenge any man to deny it. Why, then, try to shout down a man whom no one can beat honestly in the ring?" These words went home and caused a strong expression of feeling in favor of the big wrestler. Only the foresters still looked darkly upon him and murmured at what they would have done had not the knight and his men at arms interfered. It was now agreed that the first prize should go to the great wrestlers, and the others should wrestle again for the lesser prizes. When the latter were rewarded, Sir Richard bought the pipe of wine from the man who won it for 5 marks, and gave orders that it should be broached at once, that who so wished might drink. This put the crowd in very good humor, with the exception of the sheriff's men, who had been compelled to pay the wagers and were in the worst of tempers. They stood muttering among themselves and casting evil looks on Little John, who was now examining the noble courser he had won. Suddenly, in a strange way that a rumor springs up, there ran a whisper through the crowd that the famous wrestler was one of Robin Hood's men. Perhaps someone else besides Sir Richard had recognized Little John, for although the great fellow had disguised himself as well as he could, yet it was impossible for him to hide his mighty frame, his broad shoulders and mighty limbs. The whisper ran around and came at the foresters' ears in an instant. They leapt at it. It was just the thing they would wish to believe, for it put the famous champion into their hands. "An outlaw! An outlaw! Seize him! Seize him!" they yelled, and made a fierce rush at the winner. Then Little John knew that he must be quick to save his neck. He made one bound into the saddle, drove his heels into the flank of his splendid steed, and was gone like the arrow from the bow. He had plenty of friends there, for the people loved the outlaws, and the crowd parted right and left to give him passage, and then closed up once more to block the way to the pursuing foresters. In a trice, Little John had galloped over the bridge and was out of sight around a bend in the road. "By my faith, I'm glad that brave Leicester has escaped, both for his master's sake and his own," quoth Sir Richard, and he ordered his men to march on, and they followed the way which Little John had taken. Little John rode fast and far, and the splendid courser did not pause in his wild gallop until his rider pulled him up in a glade where Robin and a dozen or more of the outlaws were gathered. "Here now, Little John, what means this haste?" cried his leader, "and from what noble hast thou taken this fine horse?" "He is mine, master, fairly won in a fair struggle," replied Little John, and he told the story of the wrestling, and gave much praise to the kind stranger who had seen that he received fair play. Little John had not recognized the knight again, so changed were Sir Richard's dress and mien. "And didst thou see aught on the road of the sad knight to whom we lent the 400 pounds?" asked Robin Hood. "Not a sign, master, not a sign," said Little John. "Did you expect him today?" "Aye, that I do," returned Robin Hood, "for it is 12 months this day since the money was lent, and before this sun sets it should be returned." "Content you, master," said the cheerful giant. "The sun is not at rest yet. I dare swear the knight will prove true and honest, for I remember that he had a trusty look in his eyes." "Well," said Robin, "I will not go to dinner this day until I have some guest to eat meat with me. So take your bow, Little John, and go with Much and Will Scarlet, and walk the Watling Street till you meet with wayfarers. Bid them come to dine with me, whoever they may be. If they be rich, they shall pay for their dinner. If they be poor, I will share my goods with them. If they be minstrels or jugglers, they shall make mirth for us." Away went the three yeomen at once, and hurried up to the highway. They looked east, they looked west, and saw no man. Then they looked along the way that ran towards Barndale, and what should they see there but a great concourse of people marching along. "By Our Lady," said Little John, "but our master will have guest enough today. Who are these coming here?" The yeoman looked closely at the train and saw that 2 monks in black habits rode at the head, each mounted with a handsome palfrey. Behind them came 7 sumpter horses, well laden, with a train of 52 spearmen guarding the party. "Why," said Much, "a bishop could not ride more royally than these black monks. By my faith, there is treasure of great worth on yonder sumpter horses, or the guard would not be so strong." "Brethren," said Little John, "here are only the 3 of us, yet we must bring these men to dinner." Much and Will Scarlet said not a word, only nodded to show their agreement with these words, and the 3 outlaws took their stand at a place where the road made a sharp turn between high banks. In this position they commanded the head of the column, and the two monks rode round the bend to find the three bowmen, shaft on string, standing fully in their way. "Bend your bows," commanded Little John, "and order the crowd to halt. I hold the life of the foremost monk in my hand." When the black monks saw the outlaws with bent bows, they drew rein, and the whole cavalcade was thrown into confusion. "Abide, churl monk," cried Little John to the leader, who seemed to be a man of greater importance than his companion. "Stand where thou art, and remember that thy death is in my hand. Evil thrift be upon thy head," went the outlaw, "for thou hast angered my master greatly, causing him to fast so long." The monk stared at Little John in surprise and fear and wonder. He did not understand the outlaw's words, and said at once, "Who is your master?" "He is Robin Hood," cried Little John in a voice of thunder. "He is a strong thief," replied the monk sourly, "and of him I have never heard good." "Thou liest," cried Little John. "He is a worthy yeoman of the forest, and he hath bidden thee to dine, and thou shalt come." Much and Will Scarlet had said nothing, but were ready with their bolts. Yet not one needed to be loosed, for the train of spearmen behind the monks melted away in a most wonderful fashion. Every man had heard the name of Robin Hood as Little John's clarion tones had rung along the hollow road, and the very sound of that dreaded name had been enough. Every man feared an ambush, and before the three resolute outlaws they turned and fled, leaving only those whose bodies were covered by the arrows. "March on," said Little John to the monks, and they were compelled to ride forward, while Much and Will Scarlet followed, ready to shoot if either should make an attempt to escape. As for Little John, he drove the 7 sumpter horses with the help of a page and a groom, all that remained faithful to the monks in their train of followers. And so they came to the forest, and to the door of the lodge where Robin was awaiting them. Robin stepped forward and greeted the newcomers with the greatest courtesy, doffing his hood, but the leading monk made no return to this polite salutation, and Little John became angry. "The fellow is a churl, master," said Little John, "but I'll soon make him doff his hood." "No force," said Robin, "no force. If he will not doff his hood for courtesy's sake, e'en let him be. How many men had this monk, John?" 52, master, when we met, but many of them be gone." "Sound your horn," said Robin, "that our fellowship may know we have guests." Little John sounded his horn, and in a trice 70 nimble yeomen ran up to the spot, every man clad in scarlet mantle and well armed. The monks looked at this brave array, and then uneasily at their sumpter horses, as if they feared for their wealth. Soon the dinner was served, and the monks sat down to it, and Robin Hood and Little John helped them to the best that was on the board. "Dine well, monk," said Robin to the superior. "Gramercy, good yeoman," said the monk, that will I, for your cheer is plentiful." "Where is your abbey when you are at home?" went on Robin. "St. Mary's Abbey," said the monk. Robin lifted his eyebrows and gave a little laugh. "And what may your position be there?" "I am the high cellarer," said the monk in a very important voice. Robin laughed again. "Why do you laugh, yeoman?" demanded the high cellarer. "I cannot help but laugh," replied Robin, "to think that the high cellarer of St. Mary's Abbey should be my guest on this day of all days in this year." "Why this day in particular?" asked the monk. "Because 12 months this day I lent £400 to be paid to the abbot of St. Mary's, and now the repayment is due. Perhaps you have brought it, monk?" "I?" cried the high cellarer. "I have brought nothing. To whom did you lend the money?" "To a poor knight." "Then let the poor knight pay his own debts," cried the monk. "Well," said Robin carelessly, "I thought perhaps the abbot was sending the money back, It looks to me as if much treasure might be in yonder packs. And he nodded towards the loads which had been taken from the sumpter horses and piled in a heap. There is no money in there, cried the high cellarer hastily. Only some clothes and baggage of little account. No money? And Robin lifted his eyebrows in surprise. And art thou setting out on a journey with no money for expenses on the way? Aye, now you remind me, said the monk quickly. Yes, there is a little money, a small matter of 20 marks for spending silver on the road. Nothing to make it worth your while, good yeoman, to unloose the packs. No, replied Robin thoughtfully, and yet they must be opened. It may be that Saint Mary herself was returning the poor knight's money, and has caused your 20... Oh, don't want to show that picture yet. And has caused your 20 marks to increase miraculously. Open the packs, Little John. The tall outlaw spread his cloak on the ground and seized the coffers which had been swung across the leading sumpter horse. He forced the lid of the first open and held it over the cloak. A glittering stream of gold poured onto the mantle. A miracle! A miracle! Cried Robin Hood. Did I not say that mayhap the 20 marks would have increased? And here's a picture of them opening the sacks of money. Little John forced another coffer open, and a second stream of gold tinkled on the shining heap below. A miracle! A miracle! Roared the outlaws in chorus, their sides shaking in laughter at their leader's jest, while the high cellarer looked on with a brow as black as night. Count the money, Little John, said Robin Hood. Little John did so, and found that it was 800 pounds and more. Give the monk his 20 marks, Little John, commanded the leader, and Little John counted out 20 marks. There you are, monk, said Robin Hood. We have not robbed you of a single silver penny. From your own mouth we heard that 20 marks was every piece of money in your coffers. So Our Lady hath wrought a miracle in bringing 800 pounds there, and it is clear that Saint Mary wishes to repay me double for the money I lent the knight to pay her abbot. Thieves and rogues you are, burst out the high cellarer fiercely. Render back my lord abbot's treasure, or you shall suffer under his heaviest curse. With bell, book, and candle he shall curse ye, and ye will be lost here and hereafter. Gadzooks, cried Robin Hood, here is a change of tone, master cellarer. Now you talk of abbot's treasure and curses, but a fig for the curses of such a man. He is hard-hearted and covetous, one who grinds the poor and will snatch the widow's mite to add to his store. Dost think we care a pin for the ill wishes of such a man? Give the monk his palfrey, Little John, and let him be gone, but the sumpter horses and the baggage are ours. The outlaws welcomed this decision with a loud shout, and the high cellarer, on second thoughts, was only too glad to find that he was to get off in safety. He scrambled to the back of his palfrey with more haste than dignity, and rode away, and his companion was allowed to follow him. Hardly had the monks disappeared among the trees than Sir Richard of the Lee rode into sight, advancing from an opposite direction. He had spent a much greater time on the road from the wrestling than Little John, for while the latter had covered the way on a swift horse, Sir Richard and his men had come at a slow pace, many of his followers being on foot. Heaven save you, Robin Hood, and all your company, said Sir Richard as he came up to the spot where the outlaw stood. Welcome, gentle knight, cried Robin. Right welcome art thou to the greenwood. And how didst thou fare at St. Mary's Abbey? Oh, the abbot was very anxious to seize my land, replied Sir Richard. But thanks to thee, kind yeoman, I ransomed it, and I am here today as I promised. I feared I should never see thee today, replied Robin. It has gone so far towards the sunset. Do not blame me because I have been so long, said Sir Richard. I was delayed on my way. I came by a wrestling, and there I saw a poor yeoman hard pressed by unfair man. Him did I stay to help, and the more gladly that I think he was a man of thine. Aye, Sir Knight, it was I, and I thank you heartily for your help, cried Little John, coming forward. It would have gone hard with me at the hands of those rascally foresters had you not stepped forward to see that I had fair play. But I knew you not, so greatly have you changed from your former figure. I thank you also, Sir Knight, added Robin. The man who helps one of my men helps me, and Little John is my right hand. I should indeed be lost in losing him. I am glad I was of service, replied Sir Richard. And here, good Robin, is your 400 pounds in this bag. Count it, and see that the sum is right. And here again is 20 marks, a small present for a great kindness to me. Put up your money, Sir Knight, laughed Robin. The debt has already been paid. Paid? Cried Sir Richard. What mean you, good Robin Hood? I have never a friend that would lay down so large a sum for me. By Our Lady, but you have, chuckled Robin, and his name will surprise you, for it is no other than the Abbot of St. Mary's. Never, said Sir Richard, never can I believe that. Why can anyone think that a fat, greedy old rogue such as he would lay down willingly the sum required to clear my debt to you? Robin laughed again. Willingly, I do not say, Sir Knight, he replied, but the sum has been received from his coffers, and I have given his high cellarer a full discharge for the money by letting the fellow go free. Sir Richard now began to see how the matter stood, and when he learned of the miracle which had changed the black monk's 20 marks to 800 pounds and more, he laughed heartily. But all the same, good yeoman, said he, I must insist on paying this, which I fully owe to you. I will not take a penny, declared Robin. I have had my money, and that from the right hands. Now, Sir Knight, what means that array of handsome bows and beautifully feathered arrows? He said this to turn the conversation, and Sir Richard replied, In faith, they are meant as a poor present to thee. Then Robin thanked him heartily, and the bows and arrows were given to the yeoman, who had received them with delight, for the weapons had been fashioned by the most skillful craftsmen and were of the highest quality. Little John, said Robin, go to the treasury and fetch the money which was paid me by the monk. 400 pounds were owing from St. Mary's Abbey, and the monk brought 800. Little John fetched the 400 pounds over and above the debt, and Robin Hood put it into the hands of Sir Richard. The knight did not wish to take it, but Robin insisted. It costs much money to maintain the state of a knight, said Robin, while I spend but little in the forest here. If you ever should be in sore straits again, come to Robin Hood, and I will not fail to share with you while I have aught in my treasury. And now we will spread the board again, for you and your company must be hungry after your long march. And so the feast was spread anew, and the grateful knight and his followers tasted of Robin Hood's cheer and blessed their noble host, who was the friend and helper of the oppressed and the unfortunate, and the enemy of all proud tyrants. That ends our chapter for today. I hope you have a great rest of the day, that you stay well. May God bless you. Goodbye.